Welcome, data enthusiasts. My name is Joseph, co-founder of Zuma Recruitment. We are the consultancy focused 100% on data tech professionals in and around the Berlin region. And this is our podcast, Data for Good, connecting you with all things data. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Ahmed Zidane. He is a product analytics leader of Berlin, and he's currently transitioning from Delivery Hero to Vault. Hey, Ahmed, how's it going today?
All good. Pleasure to be in the podcast, and exciting.
Awesome. Good to hear it. And a pretty big topic to discuss today. I understand we're going to be looking into the modern analytics landscape.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Awesome. I want to ask, why is this topic so interesting to you? And also, might we be focusing more on the tech, the people, or the processes, or all of them generally today?
Yeah, I think the question of analytics, especially these days, is what can analytics provide to the business? So how this has changed over the years. Many years ago, analytics was different. So the expectations even from the analyst and the analytics function was different than now. So I think it's really interesting because the way we frame analytics, of course, the definition can be different from one company to another. But the way we frame analytics in general has a role to play on how can we choose the people and how can we set expectations from a team that we can have inside the company. And this, of course, will reflect on the company's future. So why in the first place am I interested to talk about the maybe how analytics look like these days? Because analytics is a key part in shaping the business. This is actually one of the things that got me interested in analytics in the first place, that I can be part of decision making in the organization. And I think we can talk about it's not something specific, like not about specifically about people or process. I think it's about everything. So I think we will talk about everything today, from people to processes to maybe tools, infrastructure, and so on. But yeah, I think this is the idea that we want to view today, more or less. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. You touched upon it then, the history and how expectations have changed. Talk us through that. What the historical analytics landscape looked like in your time, or even earlier than your time, and also what was the function and tasks of analysts way back when?
Sure. So I think, analytics exists since a really long time, but it had different namings. I think maybe in the 90s, so maybe in the 2000s, it started to get this like analytics structure and like big data and all of this, but it exists, of course, even before that. I think even like maybe in the 60s or like these times. So I think the main focus back then for analytics or any data related job was to basically help guide the business through some numbers. So we more or less view some numbers and be able to take some good decisions based on that. How things changed from back then until now is that analytics is not more or less about numbers right now. Analytics is about more or less getting things right. So it's not viewing numbers anymore. It's basically being a key part of decision making. And analytics doesn't have to be only about numbers. So for example, of course, when we speak about analytics, we think about the quantitative part of taking decisions and like viewing insights and so on, but also there is the qualitative part, which, for example, in a product organization, for example, it can be done by a UX researcher. So I think the person who is responsible for gathering all of these insights, qualitative, quantitative, any kind, and trying to translate this into a useful story that the business can use to actually grow furthermore, I think this person is the analyst right now. So it's a little bit different how the analyst was many years ago. I think these days, the analyst is not only a person who can code and get some numbers or run some experiments, for example, understand some statistics and so on. I think the analyst nowadays is a strategist, a consultant, even sometimes a project manager of his own. An analyst, I think, can be responsible for all the data pipelines in the company. Of course, again, we need to say that this will differ from one company to another. It depends on the structure, but maybe from my experience, because most of my experience was focused on product analytics. So specifically talking about a product organization, I think the product analyst nowadays have a broader definition than they used to be many years ago.
The whole title and position of product analyst hasn't long existed. Am I right? It was more of a generic data analyst. So what's given rise to this specificity of the product analyst?
Yeah, this is true. So I think the term product analyst didn't exist before. It was just data analytics. I think any kind of analytics. I think what helped this role exist is more or less the technologies we started to have in the last years. So, for example, something like Google Analytics that allowed people to track data easily and understand the user interaction in a product environment, something like that. So the amount of data, the massive amount of data we started to have made these branches of analytics more or less. Before that, it was just like data analytics, and we used whatever kind of data we have to take some actions. So I think the tools played some role into inventing these new positions. And I think also it's how organizations always want to optimize to further even more. So for example, we started also having startups many years ago that startups didn't exist in maybe, I don't know, the 70s or something. Maybe it existed, but with a different definition, right? So it's not like the modern tech startup and so on. So when we started having startups, people started shifting their focus into something else. Like, for example, one startup wants to only grow, while another startup wants to make profit first. So we started having different strategies based on the startup definition and condition and so on. So when we started having different strategies with different startups or different organizations, we started needing different people to do that. So there's a different person who can help you to grow, and there's another person or another analyst, if we're speaking about analytics, who can help you, for example, to optimize your processes and be cost efficient and make more profit. So I think this is how we branched different kind of analytics over the years.
Yeah, and we can go into lots of different areas of analytics with a company that's growing. Is it about reducing the initial costs? Is it about increasing the revenue? Is it about managing orders, recognizing where orders come from? All these areas can focus on product analytics. Yeah. When you look at the modern analytics environment now, what do you believe to be the guiding purpose of an analytics team for a business? Yeah. Say an established business that's beyond, say, the first 3 years.
Yeah, so I think the key part here is, so the purpose of analytics would be giving recommendations and actions, not insights and numbers. So of course, giving recommendations and actions backed by numbers, not only giving numbers. So I think this is the main purpose of modern analytics, is to, as I said, like in a product organization, for example, a product analyst will be doing some engineering tasks, some strategy, analytics, dashboarding, and experimentation, and so on. But the key part of all of this is to basically move the business one step further. So yeah, I think this is this is it, and this has been the case for a long time. But I think we started focusing more right now on analytics as a key function in a product organization than before.
I'd agree. And especially with the recommendations and actions. But I wonder if the emergence of machine learning engineering and its ability to make those recommendations and actions, where that will now push the role of the analytics team.
Sure. So actually, it's really interesting to see all the crazy AI and like machine learning things that has been like coming these days. And we all think as humans, right? We all think that what will happen in the future actually to the tech jobs, to the product and so on. Well, there's no real answer here. We will see what happens, but my opinion is that I think machine learning and AI will actually help people to do more things rather than, I don't know, replace people, or how other people might see it. But I think we can really use these tools that will even advance more in the future and be able to take more accurate actions in less time. So it's really interesting. Like it will be really interesting to see how things will push the analytics team, how the AI will push the analytics team to be this advanced, I think.
I think history shows, for all the doomsday sayers, history shows that we've always advanced beyond the technology. We've always let technology enable us rather than replace us. And with that, I wonder whether you think in the next 10 to 20 years, the product analyst role profile still exists. And if it does, what does it look like? And if it doesn't, what comes after it?
Definitely not. I think in 10 years, we will have another podcast called The Modern Landscape of Product Analytics.
Yeah, sure. We can fact check everything we've talked about today.
Yeah. No, I think so. For sure, it will differ. It will differ a lot than now. But I think the core concept of analytics will stay the same. It's just the way we do it will change. So again, analytics is about helping the business to grow, deriving insights and so on. But maybe I can give an example actually in my mind. So one of the things that maybe companies or organizations have difficulties to do sometime is to estimate the effort needed for their projects. So for example, if we have project X that can have an impact of XYZ, which might be a large impact that will provide more profit for the organization, for example, we can start implementing this project without paying attention to the needed effort. So maybe this project will take 2 years and a specific number of human capacity that we will not be able to afford, for example. One thing that comes to my mind is that analytics is not only analyzing the business. We can actually analyze the process itself as well. So something like that, which of course exists right now with all the modern project management tools like, I don't know, Jira and so on. They provide tools that you can use to analyze the process itself. But maybe in the future, these stuff can be more automated. So we can be more intelligent, not only in taking right decisions in the business, but also in utilizing, for example, our capacity or choosing the right process on how to work. So maybe analytics get broader than analyzing the business. Maybe it's analyzing everything that happens. So this can be interesting in the future.
Interesting. When we look at the modern current state and even the future, we've talked about, it's a given that businesses will just adopt all these automated processes and the most shiny bells and whistles for their data environment. But what do you think that business and even data leaders need to be mindful of when they invest in analytics, or even your area, product analytics? What do businesses need to be mindful of? The risks, for example, of going too far in the direction of analytics.
I think the best investment for leaders should be in the infrastructure. So this is actually relevant to what we are talking about AI and all of this. So the infrastructure and the tools we have, they keep changing over the years. And basically the winner in the market is those who try to cope with these changes. So I think the best investment that people can offer for analytics, or like leaders can do to invest in analytics in one organization, is basically paying attention to the needed infrastructure. Let's give an example. So for example, many companies, they spend a massive amount of time from like human capacity and human resource trying to make ad hoc requests. So for example, I need to take some like ad hoc decisions and I need to see some ad hoc analysis of something. So I just keep doing ad hoc requests and so on. It takes a lot of time to do these ad hoc requests. While, for example, there is an alternative solution that also many companies do, is allowing self-service tools. So for example, I don't have an analyst in one company, but I can do these simple stuff to save time, to save the time of the analyst. So things like that, those decisions, of course, this is only applicable for now, but maybe in the future, there is more things to come that we don't know about. So these kind of decisions, they really make a difference when the leaders think about the analytics and how to invest in a right way in analytics and so on. Of course, this is one thing, and the other thing is for sure the culture. So I don't think this has a specific timing, now in the future as well, but every organization has to invest in spreading the culture of analytics. I had an experience in one startup before, which is right now acquired by Uber. It was acquired by Uber 4 years ago. I think this was one of the best experiences in my career until now. And the main reason was the culture. People really understood numbers. You didn't have to be an analyst to know numbers. And even the people who were not that strong in this area, they actually wanted to learn, to understand more how to tell a story with numbers. Maybe do simple things like do a simple dashboard, like simple analytics, but this is not the important thing. The important thing is to really understand everything, what position was in this company. So the culture is really important because it helps you to act as a team and take more intelligent decisions as a team.
So it sounds like you worked with a progressive business. Of course, if they've been acquired or adopted by Uber, that also suggests so. With that in mind, how would you describe a great modern day data culture?
I think the best culture you can have in an organization is this culture that can basically that they are not afraid to try new things. So we might have a lot of plans to implement. Let's say we might have a certain roadmap based on the company's strategy in the next period of time, and we might feel a little bit constrained to those to this roadmap with a list of projects that we need to implement, for example. People often focus, like put a really heavy focus on this planned initiatives, and they forget that we have a lot more things to understand in the first place. If we are talking about a customer related service, like we offer something to the customer, for example, so we need to understand a certain user behavior to be able to actually come up with ideas or solve a certain issue that we have in our product. So there is a tendency that maybe people would like to focus more on the roadmap part without understanding how people behave, or like what is the user behavior in the first place. So yeah, I think we just need to understand a little bit before we actually think of the solution.
And that comes from taking risks and trying new things.
Exactly. It's at the end, it's trial and error. Of course, as a calculated risk, like not shooting in the dark totally, but we need to try things and we need to fail, by the way, because failure is not a bad thing. It's actually a learning rather than a failure. So yeah, this is part of the process, of course. Yeah.
So there, you've given us there a couple of ideas for what data and business leaders could focus on, allowing for self-service tools and not being afraid to try new things. Are there any other areas that you'd suggest data leaders could focus on to make the most of their modern data environment?
Well, I think, of course, the last part would be the people. So I didn't say this because it should be obvious somehow to invest in the people, of course. But yeah, I think people make a lot of difference. And this is also part of the culture that we were speaking about. If we have the right culture, we will attract the right people, and we can invest in those people to help them grow even further and help us to grow the business.
Yeah. A lot is said about culture of a business, any kind of business. And we can talk about the whole people and leadership aspect, but how about culture where it concerns understanding data? The example you used of the company that you work for, I think you'd said that, everybody across the organization understands data. How important is that about culture? That all different divisions, all different teams understand how to work with data and what to look for.
Sure. So I think this has many benefits, I would say. Maybe the first obvious benefit is that mostly everyone will be able to take the right decision. So you have this like somehow common language between people. If everyone understands data in an organization, you don't really have to invest a lot of time in convincing people doing things, because this is also how day-to-day life works at organizations. So maybe you have some hypotheses and you have some numbers to back up these hypotheses. So you start basically convincing people to, hey, let's move to this direction because we have those numbers and it says that we should implement those actions. So this is how things go, but maybe the main issue is that if not all the people would understand, like 100% be into data and numbers, maybe you'll have some difficulties trying to move people around you. While if everyone is aware of how data works and they are aware of the human behavior and the user behavior and how things can impact the business through small changes that we can do in the product, for example, they are easy to move. People are easy to take actions, and you feel that you have, as I said, like a common language to speak somehow. So it's important in the communication perspective to communicate with people in the first place. And of course, also the part where I said something actually like 1 minute ago. I said, how can you make a little change in the product and see a huge impact from this change? This is something that only people who understand data will be able to translate. So anyone who works in an organization, for example, a product organization, can be a product manager, a designer, anyone, an engineer, anyone. If this person understands data, they will be able to translate this change to the impact that it had on the business. And this actually gives the person motive to continue because they understand the value of what they are doing.
And also what to focus on now and in the future.
Exactly. It gives you a big picture of everything, basically, because maybe not everyone in an organization has this big picture. It depends on the task they are doing. It depends on the team they are in, the domain, and so on. So understanding these aspects helps you understand everything in your company and in the business.
You touched upon the leaders, what they can do to invest. You've touched upon people in the organization. As a data and product analytics leader yourself, if we look at the analysts now, especially given the Data for Good podcast, what can they do, analysts right now, what can they do to help develop their own career?
Sure. So I think the first thing that comes to people's mind would be to take more classes or like online courses, read more books and so on, which is of course super useful. But I think there are more things that we can do in day-to-day life to help ourselves be better analysts, I would say. So one thing I always think about is to involve the analytics team in usability testing or research done by UX researchers. So we have in a product organization, we would have some user interviews trying to understand their issues with the product we are offering. Not necessarily their issues, but just general feedback. We want to hear feedback from people. Usually these sessions are only conducted by researchers, but sometimes it's really nice that the analyst exists in these meetings. For example, why? Because the analyst is always behind the numbers. They are just trying to understand people through some numbers they are viewing, through some charts and so on. But it's really nice to understand the people from their actual words. This is totally different. And it's actually it kind of completes the picture for understanding the user behavior. So it's not only numbers, as I said, but also participating in these usability testing and user interviews and trying to really understand how human think, because we are humans at the end. So just put yourself in in the customer's shoe and see how the customer would behave if we introduce a certain change in the product and so on. So this really makes a difference because if the analyst is able to master this part, they are able to come up with a hypothesis to start their work a lot faster than other people, and they are able to move things a lot faster than other people.
And although it might sound obvious, how does that help the business?
So of course the main purpose of that is to understand the user behavior. I'm talking of course from my experience because I've always worked in a user-centric organization, but if we understand the user behavior, we're able to take the right decisions, as simple as that. Actually, I want to say that not all the time data makes sense, and this is totally normal in all the organizations. Sometimes you see some data, but you can't really translate it. This is the most important time that you participate in these things. participate in interviews, trying to understand how user think and so on, like qualitative data more or less.
So data doesn't always make sense. So do you mean to business stakeholders?
What? No,
sorry, you said the data doesn't always make sense. Do you mean who to? Doesn't make sense to who?
To everyone, even to the analyst. Sometimes
okay.
Sometimes the analyst would analyze something, but really the data doesn't make sense.
Right.
Why? Because sometimes there is unexpected behavior from the user that we will not be able to understand from the data. There might be even some gamification. For example, if you're providing a physical service with different parties, people might try to gamify the system. So these things, of course, you need data to understand, but in the first place, you need to see the feedback. You need to hear the feedback and then see the data in order to connect the dots between them.
Right. Okay, I get it. We're almost out of time. I wonder, again, for the idea of data for good, are there any extra things that you think product analytics professionals can do to keep themselves ahead of the curve in the modern day data environment?
I think my recommendation would go to the communication part rather than like I don't want to speak about specific tool or something that come up in the future or something. I think communication is key. So I think personally, I always like to work on my communication skills because it helps make my life and other life people easier. So if we can communicate easily, again, we take the right decision in a second. And even if it's not right, we're able to correct our mistake, to try and learn to use things better, and so that we can iterate and apply more and take more better decisions in the future, more or less.
Okay. So with that point, what can a product analysts do? What can a product analyst do right now to help them communicate better? What can they do practically on the job?
I think storytelling is one part. So trying to be more organized when you tell a story, for example, trying to simplify also a little bit, because I think people, they have better value from the analysis, for example, when it's more simple, rather than a complicated analysis that maybe not all the non-data people would understand. So I think people trying to work on the storytelling part, I think this is really important to develop the communication part. Yeah.
Be more organized, simplify your communication. I like it. Ahmed, thanks very much for your time. Thanks very much for giving us a somewhat brief overview of the modern data landscape. Appreciate it.
Sure, it was a pleasure. And it was really nice to talk, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, great stuff. And I ask if anyone has questions of Ahmed or of us at Data for Good to fire them through. We'll be posting this on LinkedIn, of course, Spotify and YouTube as well. So many ways to communicate. Thanks very much, Ahmed, and see you all soon.
Perfect.